romance, fantasy, romantasy. I never heard the term romantasy until Goodreads added it as a category in their 2023 Reader's Choice Awards. Now, I'm sure the term romantasy goes further back than 2023, but I think the Goodreads designation made romantasy an official genre because I now hear it talked about regularly among agents and publishers, and now I want to talk about it because I'm Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Obviously, romantasy is a genre blend of fantasy and romance, but we need to distinguish between fantasy romance and romantic fantasy. Fantasy romance is a romance story in a fantasy setting. Romantic fantasy is a fantasy story with a romance subplot or arc that takes a substantial part of the story. Fantasy romance is a subgenre of romance, and the story focuses on a relationship arc that ends with happily ever after. That is not romantasy. Romantasy is a subgenre of fantasy where the main plot follows the rules or guidelines of a fantasy plot, but where the B plot, the romance subplot, takes up a significant portion of the story. Romantasy also uses many romance tropes. What are romance tropes? I think I heard a song about that.
Romance tropes help readers find more stories they already like.
If you use tropes like a pro,
you can watch your readers grow.
Soulmates who can't find their way.
Weird true love on your vacay.
Monster loves it, you go.
Forbidden love with your girl.
Fake engagement, hoping mom will never know.
Different brothers, you can't let your feelings show.
Twins trade places, is life better? Maybe no.
Only one bed when you're trapped in lots and lots and lots and lots of snow.
Are we done?
my stepbrother is kinda cute.
Movie star loves a normal dude.
Enemy is now their lovers.
One of them works undercover.
Second chance to find romance.
They had it bad at their first glance.
Love triangle, who will win?
Oh no, you love your best friend.
Secret baby.
Family drama sharing.
Dead world changes ways for you forever.
Romance tropes are super awesome.
I'll link the video below for the full song. Now, for Romantasy, the main plot is a traditional fantasy plot, maybe involving an evil overlord, a chosen one, a reluctant hero, whatever. There most likely will be a quest and, of course, a magic system. Apparently, Romantasy magic systems often involve elemental magic, at least according to an article by Romantasy author Claire Sager, which I'll also link below. But she lists several other common tropes in Romantasy, including a female lens. The story is usually from a woman's POV because the readership is largely made up of women. The meet cute, which is the moment the protagonist meets their love interest. Strong heroine who saves the day. Now, these books do not have damsels in distress, but rather it is the women who do the saving. Enemies to lovers. This is apparently the best-selling romance trope, so obviously it will be popular in Romantasy, especially since we can fantasize Romeo and Juliet divisions like werewolves and vampires, or vampires and witches, or any of the above, and normal humans. Fairy tale retellings. Many fairy tale retellings, not all of them, but a lot of fairy tale retellings are romantasies. Since enemies to lovers is so popular, of course that means that there is a lot of Beauty and the Beast, which is probably the most retold fairy tale. For example, just take a look at Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses. Just because romantasy is a relatively new term in genre fiction, that doesn't mean these types of books haven't been around forever. I think you can go back to Patricia McKillip's Forgotten Beasts of Eld. I love that book, which is the first ever winner of the World Fantasy Award and is at least Romantasy adjacent. In the 80s, Tanith Lee made a name for herself with her really dark fairy tale retellings, but her most famous work is probably The Silver Medal Lover, which is a romantic science fiction story. And I would like to include all romantic speculative fiction under Romantasy, including paranormal romance, which has actually been a thing for a while, and romantic science fiction, which I've been seeing more and more of, especially in Shelf It or Shove It. But I don't think we need a separate category for romantic science fiction, do we? What would we even call it? Roma Science? Rom-sci? Actually, Rom-sci sounds pretty good. If Rom-sci becomes a thing, you heard it here first. But I really want to include paranormal romance with Romantasy because I believe the genre would not have happened without Twilight. Let me explain. Twilight was a YA paranormal romance, which I'm sure everyone's heard of, published 20 years ago in 2005, and it was a phenomenal success and influenced a generation of readers. And those readers have grown up as 20 years later. And like all of us who've become readers at an early age, the books that hooked us are the types of books that sort of stick with you and that you look for. For me, it was Narnia and John Carter and Lord of the Rings and Robert Heinlein. But for many, mostly female readers in the early mid to late aughts, it was Twilight. And those readers kept looking for similar books, and publishers were happy to supply them. And many of those readers kept sticking to the YA age category, even as adults, which ended up distorting the YA market, but that's another video for another day. And now those readers are writers and literary agents and editors. And this type of romantasy, this heavy romance speculative fiction, has taken on a life of its own. And we did get some really good books. I'm thinking of Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles, which I think are fantastic. Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. The list goes on and on. Speaking of Sarah J. Maas, The Court of Thorns and Roses, another Beauty and the Beast inspired romantasy, by the way, was originally published as YA because that's where the publishers thought readers interested in this type of book would look for it. But as the series progressed, it moved into the adult section, which I think is key because I believe that was somewhat responsible for Goodreads pushing a age category that wasn't YA, that wasn't adult, but was in this romance fantasy subspace where there has been so much demand from readers for these types of stories. And I say thank God for that, because now adult readers who are interested in those romantasy stories are finding the books they desire in an adult section rather than distorting the YA category. And to prove the point, just look at the huge success of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And we're seeing it more in other media like the Shadow and Bone Netflix series based on Leigh Bardugo's books. And we have the Winx Saga, Vampire Diaries, Discovery of Witches. There's a lot of shows that I think are romantasies. And again, I'm including all speculative fiction in romantasy. I personally am over the moon that romantasy has become an official publishing category because, as I always say, genres and subgenres are meant to help readers find the types of books they want to read. And for me, I'm not a huge fan of romantasy, so it helps me a lot to filter out romantic fantasy from traditional fantasy, because usually I'm looking for traditional fantasy. There's exceptions, of course. Like I said, I was a huge fan of Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles, but I like knowing beforehand whether the fantasy I pick up is a romantic fantasy, aka Romantasy, or a traditional fantasy. What about you? What do you think of Romantasy as a subgenre? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be